She hid the real footage. That's what a little girl said, and that simple sentence was the start of a massive revelation. A furious millionaire decided to confront the editor. But why did she hide the original material? What was in that footage that no one wanted the public to see? Today, you're going to find out the whole truth. And get ready, because what was behind the cameras will shock you. Stay with me until the end. You won't believe what was revealed. The revelation: the rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan law office as Michael Sterling adjusted his Italian silk tie for the third time in 10 minutes. At 38, the tech mogul had built a billion-dollar empire from nothing. But today he felt more vulnerable than he had since sleeping in his car during college. Across the mahogany table sat his 7-year-old daughter Emma, her small hands clasped tightly in her lap, auburn curls framing a face that was a perfect blend of his own strong jawline and her mother's delicate features. "Daddy," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm outside. "I need to tell you something important about Mommy and the mean man in the black robe." Attorney Sarah Chun, Michael's lead counsel, leaned forward with practiced patience. At 34, she had built her reputation defending high-profile custody cases, but something in the child's demeanor made her set down her gold pen and give Emma her complete attention. "What about the man in the black robe, sweetheart?" Sarah's voice carried the warmth that had made her successful with child witnesses. Emma's eyes darted between the adults, her small fingers twisting the hem of her pink dress. "The judge. Mommy gave him a big envelope full of money. She said it would make sure I never had to see Daddy again." The words tumbled out in a rush, followed by tears that carved silent paths down her cheeks. Michael's breath caught in his throat. For 2 years, he had watched helplessly as the family court system consistently ruled in favor of his ex-wife, Victoria, despite her history of emotional manipulation and her new boyfriend's questionable influence. Every supervised visit, every denied request for increased custody, every legal defeat had felt like another wall built between him and his daughter. Sarah's professional composure never wavered, but her mind raced through the implications. Judicial corruption in high-stakes custody cases wasn't unheard of, but proving it was another matter entirely. "Emma, this is very serious. Can you tell us exactly what you saw?" The little girl nodded solemnly, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "It was last Tuesday. Mommy thought I was sleeping in the car, but I wasn't. She met the judge in the parking lot behind the courthouse. She gave him the envelope and said, 'This should be enough to make sure Michael never gets more than his pathetic supervised visits.'" Michael's hands clenched into fists. He thought about all the nights he'd questioned himself, wondering if he truly was the inadequate father the court decision suggested. Now the pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. "We need to be very careful here," Sarah said, her prosecutor instincts kicking in. "If what Emma is saying is true, we're dealing with serious criminal activity. But we'll need evidence beyond a child's testimony." The office fell silent, except for the rain's relentless percussion against the windows. Michael looked at his daughter, seeing not just the victim of his failed marriage, but a brave little girl who had found the courage to speak truth to power. "Emma, are you absolutely sure about what you saw?" She nodded with the certainty that only children possess. "I remember everything, Daddy. Mommy wore her red coat, and the judge had a briefcase. They talked for 5 minutes, and then Mommy got back in the car and was really happy. She called someone and said, 'It's done. Michael will never take Emma away from us.'" Sarah made detailed notes, her mind already formulating strategy. "Michael, we need to move quickly but carefully. If Judge Harrison is corrupt, reopening your custody case could force his hand. But we'll need to gather evidence while protecting Emma." The weight of the moment settled on Michael's shoulders like a lead blanket. He had the resources to fight, but this battle would require more than money. It would demand courage, strategy, and perhaps most importantly, the right allies. As he looked at Sarah's determined expression, he felt the first spark of hope he'd experienced in months. "What's our next move?" he asked. "We document everything, file for emergency custody review, and prepare for the fight of our lives," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the steel that had made her legendary in New York legal circles. Outside, the storm was just beginning. Chapter 2. The Alliance. 3 days after Emma's revelation, Sarah Chun's law office had transformed into a war room. Whiteboards covered in timelines and evidence charts lined the walls, while boxes of legal documents created a maze across the hardwood floor. Michael arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, as had become his routine, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the bakery downstairs. "Any luck with the private investigator?" he asked, handing Sarah the steaming cup. Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully, noting how the gesture had become their morning ritual. Despite the professional circumstances, she found herself looking forward to these quiet moments before the chaos of legal strategy began. Detective Marcus Rodriguez comes highly recommended. 25 years with NYPD, specializes in corruption cases. He'll be here at 9. Michael nodded, studying the evidence board they'd constructed. Photos of Judge Harrison, timeline markers, and Emma's hand-drawn picture of what she'd witnessed created a compelling but circumstantial narrative. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed." Victoria's sudden confidence in court, her smug expressions when rulings went her way. "Don't blame yourself," Sarah said, her voice softer than her usual professional tone. "Judicial corruption is designed to be invisible. That's what makes it so devastating when it occurs." The morning sun streamed through the office windows, highlighting the exhaustion in both their faces. They've been working 18-hour days, and Sarah noticed how Michael's usually immaculate appearance had given way to rolled-up sleeves and loosened ties. There was something appealing about seeing him vulnerable human. "Sarah," Michael said, turning from the evidence board, "I want you to know how grateful I am. Most attorneys would have told me to accept the status quo." She met his gaze, feeling an unexpected flutter in her chest. "Most attorneys haven't seen a 7-year-old show that kind of courage." "Emma's brave, Michael. She gets that from you." Their moment was interrupted by a knock on the door. Detective Rodriguez entered, his bearing unmistakably that of a career law enforcement officer. At 52, his graying temples and weathered face spoke of years spent navigating New York's darker corners. "Ms. Chun, Mr. Sterling," he said, settling into the conference chair with practiced efficiency. "I've reviewed the preliminary information you sent. If your daughter's account is accurate, we're looking at federal charges. Judicial corruption crosses state and federal jurisdictions." Michael felt his pulse quicken. "What do we need to prove it?" Rodriguez pulled out a thick folder. "I've been investigating Judge Harrison for 6 months as part of a broader corruption probe. 3 other custody cases have shown similar patterns: wealthy defendants losing despite strong legal positions, followed by unexplained financial deposits in offshore accounts." Sarah leaned forward, her prosecutor instincts engaged. "Do you have surveillance capabilities?" "Limited, but yes. The challenge is timing. If we move too aggressively, Harrison could destroy evidence. If we wait too long, he might rule on other cases, causing more damage." Michael studied the detective's weathered face. "What's your recommendation?" "We set up controlled surveillance on Harrison while simultaneously filing your custody motion. The legal pressure might force him to contact Victoria or his other co-conspirators. That's when we'll get our evidence." The plan was risky, but Michael felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had driven his business success. "How long do we have?" "Your emergency custody hearing is scheduled for next Friday," Sarah said, consulting her calendar. "That gives us 8 days to build our case." Rodriguez stood, shaking hands with both attorneys. "I'll need complete access to Emma's testimony, recorded if possible. And Mr. Sterling, you should know, this could get ugly. Corrupt officials don't go down quietly." After the detective left, Michael and Sarah sat in contemplative silence. The magnitude of what they were attempting settled between them like a heavy blanket. "Are you having second thoughts?" Sarah asked. Michael looked at Emma's drawing on the evidence board. A simple sketch of a man in black robes taking money from a woman in red. "No, my daughter deserves better than a corrupt system. She deserves the truth." Sarah nodded, feeling a surge of admiration for his determination. As she watched him study the evidence with fierce concentration, she realized her feelings for Michael had evolved beyond professional respect. But with everything at stake, those feelings would have to wait. Chapter 3. Dangerous ground. The federal building's granite steps gleamed under Friday morning's autumn sun as Sarah and Michael climbed toward what could be the most important hearing of their lives. Sarah carried her leather briefcase with practiced confidence, but Michael noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she adjusted her charcoal suit jacket. "Remember," she said quietly as they approached the security checkpoint, "we're not accusing Judge Harrison directly today. We're simply requesting emergency custody review based on new information regarding Emma's welfare." Michael nodded, his own nerves tightly controlled beneath his navy blue suit. The past week had been a whirlwind of depositions, evidence gathering, and strategy sessions that had stretched deep into the night. Working so closely with Sarah had revealed layers to her personality that intrigued him: her fierce dedication, her unexpected sense of humor during stressful moments, and the way she unconsciously tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating. Inside the courthouse, Victoria Sterling waited with her attorney, Richard Blackwood. At 35, Victoria remained strikingly beautiful, her blonde hair styled in the perfect bob that had graced society pages during their marriage. But Michael now saw the calculating coldness in her green eyes that he'd once mistaken for sophistication. "Michael," Victoria said with false warmth as they entered the courtroom, "I hope you're not planning to put Emma through unnecessary trauma with these frivolous motions." Sarah stepped slightly forward, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by either Michael or Victoria. "Mrs. Sterling, all communication should go through counsel." Judge Harrison entered, his imposing frame filling out the black robes that Emma had described with such precision. At 60, his silver hair and stern expression commanded respect, but Michael now studied him with new eyes, looking for signs of the corruption his daughter had witnessed. "This court will come to order," Harrison intoned, his voice carrying the authority of 15 years on the bench. "We're here for an emergency custody review in the matter of Sterling versus Sterling. Ms. Chen, your motion please." Sarah rose with fluid grace, her voice clear and confident. "Your Honor, my client requests immediate revision of custody arrangements based on new information regarding the child's emotional welfare and safety concerns that have recently come to light." Blackwood immediately objected. "Your Honor, this is clearly an attempt to relitigate settled matters. Mr. Sterling has already had his day in court multiple times." Harrison's expression remained neutral, but Michael noticed a slight tightening around his eyes. "Ms. Chun, what new information justifies disrupting this child's established routine?" This was the crucial moment. Sarah had rehearsed her next words dozens of times, knowing they had to be perfect. "Your Honor, the child has provided testimony regarding irregular communications between parties that may have influenced previous proceedings. We request in-camera review of this testimony to protect the child's welfare." The courtroom fell silent. Victoria's face went pale, while Blackwood shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Harrison's pause stretched longer than judicial decorum typically allowed. "That's a serious allegation, Ms. Chun. Do you have supporting evidence?" "We do, Your Honor. We've prepared a sealed affidavit with corroborating witness statements and are prepared to present additional evidence in chambers." Michael watched Harrison's face carefully, looking for the tells that Emma had unknowingly taught him to recognize. The slight flush creeping up the judge's neck, the way his fingers drummed against the bench, signs of a man under pressure. "Very well," Harrison said finally. "I'll review the sealed materials in chambers. Court will recess for 30 minutes. As the judge retreated, Victoria approached Michael directly, ignoring both attorneys. "What game are you playing, Michael? You're going to destroy our daughter's stability for your wounded ego?" Michael met her gaze steadily. "I'm protecting our daughter from people who would manipulate the system for personal gain." The words hit their mark. Victoria's composure cracked slightly, revealing the desperation beneath her polished exterior. "You don't know what you're doing. Some things are better left alone." Sarah moved between them. "Mrs. Sterling, please return to your table." In the hallway outside, Michael and Sarah found a quiet corner near the windows overlooking the city. The autumn leaves created a tapestry of gold and red against the urban landscape, a stark contrast to the tension inside the courtroom. "How do you think he'll react?" Michael asked. Sarah studied his profile as he gazed out the window. "If he's innocent, he'll be thorough and fair. If he's guilty ... double quotes." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Guilty people make desperate choices." Their hands almost touched on the window ledge before Sarah pulled back, maintaining professional distance despite the growing connection between them. The stakes were too high for personal complications, but she couldn't deny the attraction she felt to this man who was willing to risk everything for his daughter's welfare. When court reconvened, Judge Harrison's demeanor had shifted. Subtly, his movements seemed more controlled, his voice more measured. "After reviewing the sealed materials, this court finds sufficient grounds for expanded evidentiary hearing. We'll reconvene Monday morning for full testimony." Victory and danger hung in the air like competing perfumes, each promising different futures for everyone in the room. Chapter 4. The investigation intensifies. Detective Rodriguez's unmarked sedan sat across from Judge Harrison's brownstone in the prestigious Upper East Side neighborhood, where maple trees cast long shadows across manicured sidewalks. It was 6:47 a.m. when Sarah slipped into the passenger seat, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a manila folder thick with documents. "Any activity?" she asked, handing Rodriguez the steaming cup. He left at 5:30 a.m., returned an hour later with what looked like a burner phone. Rodriguez replied, adjusting his surveillance equipment. "Your custody hearing spooked him. He's making moves." Sarah opened her folder, revealing photographs and financial records that painted a disturbing picture. Michael's forensic accountant found 3 large cash deposits in Harrison's wife's account, each occurring within 48 hours of major custody rulings. Through the sedan's tinted windows, they watched Harrison emerge from his brownstone, his usual confident stride replaced by nervous, hurried movements. He checked his phone repeatedly, glancing over his shoulder with the paranoia of a man feeling walls closing in. "There," Rodriguez said, raising his camera. "He's using the burner." 20 blocks away, Michael paced the conference room of Sarah's law office, his usual composed demeanor fractured by the stress of the investigation. Emma sat at the small table near the window, coloring in a prince's book while occasionally glancing at her father with the perceptive concern that only children possess. "Daddy, are you worried about the mean judge?" she asked, not looking up from her careful coloring of a purple dragon. Michael knelt beside her chair, marveling at his daughter's resilience. "A little bit, sweetheart. But Sarah and I are working very hard to make sure everything turns out right." Emma set down her crayon and looked at him with eyes that held wisdom beyond her years. "I wasn't supposed to see what Mommy did, was I?" The question hit Michael like a physical blow. He realized his 7-year-old daughter had been carrying the weight of adult corruption, understanding instinctively that she'd witnessed something wrong. "No, Emma, you weren't supposed to see that. But I'm proud of you for being brave enough to tell us. Will Mommy be in trouble?" Michael chose his words carefully, knowing that despite everything, Victoria was still Emma's mother. Sometimes adults make bad choices, and when they do, Other adults have to help fix those choices. That's what we're doing." His phone buzzed. With a text from Sarah, Harrison made contact. "Rodriguez recording everything. Meeting you at office in 20 minutes. When Sarah and Rodriguez arrived, their faces carried the electric tension of a breakthrough. Michael stood as they entered, noting how Sarah's usual professional polish had given way to excitement, barely contained beneath her composed exterior. "We got him," Rodriguez announced without preamble. "Harrison called Victoria 30 minutes ago. We have the entire conversation recorded." Sarah activated her laptop, revealing an audio analysis program with distinctive waveforms. "Listen to this," she said, pressing play. Harrison's voice filled the room, distorted by the poor connection, but clearly audible. "The Sterling custody case is compromised. The child knows about our arrangement. You need to consider alternative options." Victoria's response came through with crystalline clarity. "What kind of alternatives?" "We paid you a fortune to ensure Michael would never get custody. The kind that involves you taking Emma somewhere far from New York jurisdiction while I figure out how to contain this situation." Michael's blood ran cold. "He's telling her to run with Emma," Rodriguez nodded grimly. "Kidnapping across state lines is a federal offense. But more importantly, it confirms the corruption charges. Harrison just admitted to taking payment for favorable rulings." Sarah was already moving toward her phone. "I'm calling the FBI. We need immediate protection for Emma and arrest warrants for both Victoria and Harrison." But Rodriguez held up his hand. "Not yet. If we move too fast, Harrison could claim entrapment and Victoria could disappear with Emma before we can stop her. We need to let this play out until Monday's hearing." The weight of the decision settled on Michael's shoulders. Allow his corrupt ex-wife and a federal judge to remain free for 3 more days, risking Emma's safety, or move immediately and potentially lose their case on procedural grounds. "What's the safe play?" he asked. Sarah met his eyes, seeing the anguish of an impossible choice. "We maintain surveillance on both Victoria and Harrison, get emergency protection orders for Emma, and prepare for Monday's hearing with everything we've gathered. And if Victoria tries to run, then we have federal agents ready to stop her at every airport and border crossing within 500 miles, Rodriguez assured him. Michael looked at Emma, still coloring peacefully by the window, unaware that her entire future hung in the balance of adult decisions and legal maneuvering. "Do it. But if there's even a hint that Victoria might take Emma, we move immediately." As Rodriguez left to coordinate federal surveillance, Sarah and Michael found themselves alone with Emma, the weight of their investigation creating an unexpected intimacy in the office space. Sarah watched Michael help Emma with her coloring, noting the gentle patience in his movements and the way he listened to her chatter about purple dragons and brave princesses. "You're a good father," she said quietly. Michael looked up, meeting her gaze. "I'm trying to be. Sometimes I wonder if I'm putting Emma through all this for the right reasons, or if I'm just being selfish. Selfish fathers don't risk everything to expose corruption," Sarah replied. "They take the path of least resistance." The moment hung between them, heavy with unspoken feelings and the recognition that their professional relationship had evolved into something more complex. But with Monday's hearing approaching and Emma's future uncertain, those feelings would have to remain unexamined for now. Chapter 5. The Trap Spring Sunday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth for late October, and Victoria Sterling sat in her penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, her manicured fingers gripping a glass of white wine with more force than necessary. The apartment, a monument to her divorce settlement, felt like a gilded cage as she paced between floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased Manhattan's glittering skyline. Her phone rang at exactly 8 p.m. Judge Harrison's voice carried barely controlled. "Panic, we have a problem. Federal agents questioned my clerk about unusual scheduling patterns in custody cases. They're building a broader investigation. Victoria's reflection in the darkened window showed a woman on the edge of losing everything she'd fought to gain. What does that mean for tomorrow's hearing? It means if that child testifies about what she saw, we're both finished. I've been a federal judge for 15 years, Victoria. I won't go to prison because you couldn't control your daughter's access to confidential conversations. The accusation stung because Victoria knew it was true. In her arrogance, she'd assumed Emma was asleep, never considering that a 7-year-old might witness and understand the transaction that secured her custody victory. So what do you propose? Victoria asked, though she already suspected Harrison's answer. You take Emma on an extended vacation. Europe, South America, somewhere without extradition treaties. I'll rule in your favor tomorrow, citing the child's need for stability, and by the time any appeals process concludes, you'll be established residents of a country that doesn't cooperate with U.S. custody orders. Victoria closed her eyes, seeing her carefully constructed life crumbling like sand. And you? I'll retire quietly, claim health issues. The investigation will lose momentum without active cases to pursue. 20 blocks away, in a federal surveillance van disguised as a telecommunications repair vehicle, Agents Rodriguez, Sarah, and Michael listened to every word through high-tech recording equipment that turned Harrison's burner phone into an unwitting broadcasting device. That's conspiracy to commit kidnapping, Rodriguez said grimly, adjusting his headphones. We have enough to arrest them both right now. Sarah studied the real-time transcript appearing on her laptop screen. But if we arrest them tonight, Harrison could claim his statements were hypothetical. We need them to take concrete action. Michael's jaw tightened as he listened to two adults casually discuss stealing his daughter's future. So we let Victoria plan to kidnap Emma. We let her take the first step, Rodriguez corrected. The moment she begins executing the plan, purchasing plane tickets, packing, moving toward any exit strategy, we have conspiracy charges that will hold up in federal court. Through the surveillance equipment, they heard Victoria's voice. Grow stronger, more determined. I'll pick up Emma from her babysitter tomorrow morning and drive to the airport. There's a 3 p.m. flight to Paris I can catch. Harrison's relief was audible. Good. I'll schedule the custody hearing for 2 p.m., rule in your favor. And by the time Michael's attorneys can file appeals, you'll be airborne. The van fell silent except for the electronic hum of recording equipment. Michael felt rage building in his chest like a physical force, but Sarah's hand on his arm provided an anchor of calm professionalism. We've got them, she said quietly. Both of them on federal charges that carry serious prison time. Rodriguez was already coordinating with other surveillance teams. Units are in position at Victoria's apartment, Emma's babysitter's location, and all major airports. The moment Victoria moves with Emma, we close the trap. Michael stared at the surveillance monitors showing Victoria's building, where his daughter was spending what could be her last night in America if their plan failed. What if something goes wrong? What if she gets to the airport before we can stop her? She won't, Rodriguez assured him. We have facial recognition software at every security checkpoint, and TSA has been briefed on the situation. But more importantly, we're not going to let it get that far. Sarah closed her laptop and met Michael's worried gaze. Tomorrow morning, this nightmare ends. Victoria and Harrison will be in federal custody, and you'll have your daughter back. The warmth in her voice carried undertones that had nothing to do with their legal strategy. Over the past 2 weeks, their professional partnership had evolved into something deeper, though neither had acknowledged it directly. Working 18-hour days, sharing takeout dinners while reviewing evidence, and witnessing each other's dedication to Emma's welfare had created bonds that transcended attorney-client relationships. Sarah, Michael said, his voice carrying exhaustion and gratitude, I couldn't have done this without you. She met his eyes in the dim light of the surveillance van. seeing not the wealthy businessman who'd first entered her office, but a father willing to risk everything for his child's welfare. You would have found a way. Good fathers always do. The moments stretched between them, heavy with unspoken feelings and the promise of possibilities once Emma's future was secure. But first, they had to survive tomorrow's operation and ensure that justice prevailed over corruption. Outside the van, New York's nighttime energy pulsed through the streets, unaware that in 12 hours, a federal judge and a socialite would discover that their carefully constructed conspiracy had been exposed by the courage of a 7-year-old girl and the determination of the adults who refused to let corruption win. Chapter 6. Monday Morning Justice. The dawn light filtered through the surveillance van's tinted windows as Michael checked his watch for the 15th time in 10 minutes. 6:23 a.m. According to their intercepted communications, Victoria would collect Emma from her babysitter's apartment at 8 a.m., giving them less than 2 hours before the trap sprung. Sarah sat beside him, her usually immaculate appearance showing signs of their sleepless night. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she'd traded her court suit for jeans and a sweater that made her look younger, more vulnerable. Despite the circumstances, Michael found himself studying her profile in the morning light, thinking about conversations they'd shared during long strategy sessions, and the way she laughed at his dry humor even under stress. "Nervous?" she asked, noticing his scrutiny. "Terrified," he admitted. "What if Emma gets caught in the middle of this operation? What if Victoria realizes she's being followed and panics?" Detective Rodriguez looked up from his communication equipment. 22 federal agents are positioned between Victoria's apartment and every possible exit route from the city. She's not going anywhere with Emma. Through their earpieces, they heard Agent Martinez's voice from the team watching Victoria's building. Subject is awake, moving around her apartment. Suitcases visible through the window. Sarah opened her laptop, showing Michael the real-time GPS tracking on Victoria's phone. "Look at this. She's been researching one-way flights to non-extradition countries all night. France, Switzerland, Brazil. She's definitely planning to run." Michael's phone buzzed with a text message. His face went pale as he read it. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "It's from Emma's babysitter, Mrs. Patterson," Victoria called, and moved pickup time to 7:30 a.m. She's accelerating the timeline. Rodriguez immediately radioed the information to all surveillance teams. Timeline just moved up 30 minutes. All units acknowledge. Responses crackled back through the RADIO. Alpha team ready, Bravo team in position, Charlie team standing by. The federal government's response to judicial corruption was swift and overwhelming. At 7:15 a.m., Victoria Sterling emerged from her building carrying a large handbag and moving with purpose toward her black Mercedes SUV. Through high-powered surveillance cameras, they watched her check her phone repeatedly, her usual confident demeanor replaced by nervous energy. "She's scared," Sarah observed, watching Victoria's body language on the monitor. "Good," Michael replied grimly. "She should be." The GPS tracker showed Victoria's route toward Mrs. Patterson's Upper West Side apartment, where Emma had spent the night blissfully unaware of the adult conspiracy swirling around her custody. Michael imagined his daughter getting ready for school, probably wearing the blue dress with white flowers that she'd chosen the night before, her auburn curls still messy from sleep. "Alpha team, subject is parking outside 247 West 84th Street. Came Agent Martinez's voice through the radio. Rodriguez keyed his microphone. "All teams hold position. We wait until she has the child in the vehicle and begins moving toward an airport or border crossing. We need clear evidence of kidnapping intent." Michael watched the surveillance monitor as Victoria approached Mrs. Patterson's building. The elderly babysitter appeared in the doorway with Emma, who was indeed wearing her blue dress and carrying the small backpack she took everywhere. Even through the grainy surveillance footage, Michael could see his daughter's animated conversation with Victoria, probably chattering about her drawings or the book Mrs. Patterson had been reading to her. Subject has the child. They're moving toward the vehicle, Agent Martinez reported. Sarah reached over and squeezed Michael's hand. Stay calm. Everything's going to be fine. Victoria helped Emma into the SUV's backseat, securing her seatbelt with the careful attention of a mother who genuinely loved her daughter, despite her willingness to steal Emma's future for her own benefit. The contradiction wasn't lost on Michael. Victoria's corruption didn't negate her maternal feelings, which somehow made the betrayal even more painful. Subject vehicle is mobile, heading south on Amsterdam Avenue, came the next report. Rodriguez consulted his tablet, showing real-time traffic analysis. She's not heading toward any of the local airports. LaGuardia and JFK would require eastern routes. She's going somewhere else. Sarah pulled up flight information on her laptop. There's a private airfield in Teterboro, New Jersey, 15 minutes from their current location, and they handle international flights without the security screening of commercial airports. That's it, Rodriguez said. Private jet, minimal federal oversight, direct route to non-extradition countries. All teams, subject is likely heading to Teterboro Airport, converge on that location. Michael felt his heart rate accelerate as red dots representing federal vehicles began moving across the GPS display like pieces on a chessboard. Everything depended on the next 20 minutes. Victoria's voice came through the intercepted communications as she made a hands-free call. The package is secure. A ta 15 minutes. An unfamiliar male voice responded. Roger, jet is fueled and flight plan filed for Paris. Departure immediately upon your arrival. They have a plane waiting, Sarah said. This isn't spontaneous. She's been planning this for days, maybe weeks. The surveillance van raced through Manhattan traffic, keeping pace with the convoy of federal vehicles pursuing Victoria toward what everyone hoped would be the final confrontation. Michael stared out the window at the city passing by, thinking about all the mornings he'd driven these same streets to his supervised visits with Emma, wondering if corrupt judges were predetermining the outcomes before he even walked into court. Subject vehicle crossing into New Jersey, Agent Martinez reported. ETA to Teterboro Airport, 8 minutes. Rodriguez keyed his radio. All teams prepare for interdiction. Wait for my signal. Chapter 7. The confrontation. Teterboro Airport's private aviation terminal gleamed in the morning sun as Victoria's black Mercedes approached the security gate. Through surveillance equipment, federal agents watched her present identification. To the guard, her movements still carrying the nervous energy that had marked her behavior all morning. In the federal command vehicle, now parked in an adjacent parking structure, Michael watched the drama unfold on multiple monitor screens. His daughter was clearly visible in the SUV's backseat, looking around with the curious interest of a 7-year-old who thought she was going on an exciting trip with her mother. Subjects have cleared airport security, Agent Martinez reported. Private jet is visible on Tarmac 7, engines already running. Detective Rodriguez held his radio, waiting for the perfect moment to spring their trap. All teams, wait for my mark. We need Victoria to demonstrate clear intent to board the aircraft with the child. Sarah sat tensely beside Michael, her laptop showing real-time communications intercepts. The pilot just radioed the tower for immediate departure clearance. They're planning to take off in less than 10 minutes. Michael's hands clenched into fists as he watched Victoria help Emma out of the SUV on the airport tarmac. His daughter carried her small pink backpack and looked excited rather than frightened, clearly believing this was a spontaneous adventure rather than a kidnapping conspiracy. She has no idea what's happening, Michael said, his voice tight with emotion. That's probably for the best, Sarah replied softly. Emma doesn't need to understand the adult corruption that led to this moment. Through their surveillance, They watched Victoria guide Emma toward the waiting Gulfstream jet, its engines whining with preparation for departure. The flight crew stood ready at the aircraft stairs, and ground personnel moved with the efficiency of a well-rehearsed operation. "This isn't Victoria's first time," Rodriguez observed grimly. "Look at how smoothly everything's coordinated. She's done this before, or at least planned it extensively." Victoria's phone rang as she approached the aircraft. Through their intercepts, they heard Judge Harrison's voice. "Are you airborne yet?" 2 minutes, Victoria replied. "Emma thinks we're going to Disneyland Paris. She's excited." "Good. I'm about to take the bench for your custody hearing. Michael and his attorney are already in the courtroom. I'll rule in your favor, cite the child's need for stability and deny all motions for increased custody. By the time they can appeal, you'll be French residents." The casual nature of their conversation, discussing Emma's future like a business transaction, sent rage coursing through Michael's veins. These two adults were stealing his daughter's childhood for their own selfish purposes, using the family court system as their personal tool of manipulation. "All teams, subject and child, are at the aircraft stairs." Agent Martinez's voice crackled through the radio. "Ready for interdiction on your command." Rodriguez looked at Michael and Sarah. "Once we move, there's no going back. Victoria and Harrison will be arrested on federal charges. Are you ready for what comes next?" Michael thought about Emma, probably excited about what she believed was a surprise trip to see Mickey Mouse, unaware that her mother was attempting to steal her away from everyone who loved her in America. "Do it. All teams, execute, execute, execute," Rodriguez commanded. Suddenly, the quiet morning at Teterboro Airport exploded into controlled chaos. Black SUVs raced onto the tarmac from multiple directions, federal agents emerging with tactical precision. Victoria, halfway up the aircraft stairs with Emma's hand in hers, froze as she realized she was surrounded. "FBI! Stop where you are!" Agent Martinez's amplified voice echoed across the tarmac. Emma looked around in confusion as adults in dark suits and sunglasses approached from every direction. "Mommy, what's happening? Are those the police?" Victoria's face showed the devastating realization that her carefully planned escape had failed. For a moment, she considered pushing Emma up the stairs and onto the plane, but the federal agents were already positioned to block any retreat. "Victoria Sterling, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and federal corruption charges," Agent Martinez announced as he approached the aircraft stairs. Meanwhile, 20 miles away in the federal courthouse, Judge Harrison was taking the bench for what he believed would be a routine custody hearing. Sarah's law partner, David Kim, stood ready to present their case, unaware of the dramatic events unfolding at the airport. "Your Honor," David said, "before we proceed, I need to inform the court that new evidence has come to light that directly impacts these proceedings." Harrison's face remained composed, but experienced court observers might have noticed the slight tremor in his hands as he shuffled papers. "What kind of evidence, counsel?" "Evidence of judicial corruption, Your Honor. Evidence that this court's previous rulings may have been influenced by improper payments." The courtroom fell silent. Harrison's face went pale as he realized his corruption had been exposed. "That's a serious accusation, counsel. Do you have proof?" David activated a laptop connected to the courtroom's audio system. "Yes, Your Honor. We have recorded conversations between you and Victoria Sterling discussing payment for favorable custody rulings." Harrison's voice filled the courtroom through the speakers. "You paid me a fortune to ensure Michael would never get custody." The judge's world collapsed. In that moment, 15 years of federal service, thousands of cases decided, a lifetime of legal experience, all destroyed by his greed and Victoria's recorded confession. Back at the airport, Emma finally understood that something was seriously wrong as federal agents placed handcuffs on her mother. "Daddy!" She cried, looking around frantically for the one adult she trusted completely. "Emma!" Michael's voice carried across the tarmac as he ran toward his daughter, finally free to embrace her without supervised restrictions or court-ordered limitations. She launched herself into his arms, her small body trembling with confusion and fear. "Daddy, why are they taking Mommy away?" Michael held her tightly, feeling 2 years of legal battles and emotional separation finally coming to an end. "Everything's going to be okay, sweetheart. Daddy's here now." Sarah approached slowly, giving father and daughter their moment while watching Victoria being led away in handcuffs. Despite Victoria's crimes, there was something tragic about watching a mother lose her child as a consequence of her own corruption and poor choices. "What happens now?" Michael asked over Emma's head. "Now," Sarah said, "you get to be Emma's full-time father. And Judge Harrison gets to explain his corruption to a federal grand jury." Chapter 8. The aftermath. 2 weeks later, Sarah's law office had returned to its normal organized state, with the evidence boards and surveillance equipment replaced by autumn flowers and the usual stack of case files. The morning sun streamed through the windows as Michael arrived for what they both knew would be their final official meeting, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the relaxed expression of a man whose world had finally been set right. Emma sat at the small table by the window, working on a new coloring book about brave princesses and wise dragons. She'd adapted to her new custody arrangement with the resilience that children possess, though she still asked occasional questions about why her mother had to go away for a while. The federal prosecutors officially accepted Victoria's plea agreement yesterday, Sarah said, accepting her coffee with a smile that had become increasingly warm over the past 2 weeks. 5 years minimum sentence, no possibility of parole. Before 3 years served. Michael nodded, feeling the complex emotions that came with seeing his ex-wife face consequences for her crimes. And Harrison? 8 years, complete disbarment, and forfeiture of his judicial pension. The FBI found evidence of corruption in 12 other custody cases spanning 4 years. He was running a systematic operation. What about the other families affected? Sarah's expression softened with the compassion that had drawn Michael to her from their first meeting. Emergency hearings are being scheduled for all 12 cases. Those children will finally get the justice they deserved. Emma looked up from her coloring. "Sarah, are you going to keep helping other kids like me?" "That's exactly what I'm going to do, sweetheart," Sarah replied, noting how the little girl had begun including her in their family conversations. Other children who need adults to fight for what's right. Michael watched the interaction between his daughter and the woman who had saved their family, feeling emotions that went far beyond gratitude. Over the past month, Sarah had become more than their attorney. She'd become Emma's advocate, his partner in strategy, and the person who'd shown him what it meant to have someone truly in his corner. "There's something else we need to discuss," Sarah said, her professional tone not quite masking personal undertones. "The custody arrangement." Michael felt his stomach tighten, wondering if some legal complication threatened their newfound stability. "What about it?" "The court has granted you full legal and physical custody, with Victoria's parental rights suspended pending completion of her sentence and extensive psychological evaluation. For all practical purposes, you're Emma's sole guardian now." Relief flooded through Michael's system like warm water. "And there's no chance this could be overturned?" "None. Victoria's conspiracy charges make any future custody claims extremely unlikely. The court takes corruption very seriously, especially when it involves children's welfare." Emma climbed down from her chair and approached the adults with the directness that characterized her personality. "Does that mean I get to live with Daddy all the time now?" "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah said, kneeling to Emma's eye level. "You get to live with your daddy, go to school here in New York, and have regular bedtimes and story time every night. And will you come visit us sometimes?" Emma asked with the innocent hope of a child who'd grown attached to the woman who'd fought for her family. Sarah looked up at Michael, seeing an invitation in his eyes that went far beyond professional courtesy. "I'd like that very much, Emma." The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibilities and the recognition that their relationship had evolved beyond attorney-client boundaries. Michael realized he'd fallen in love with Sarah's fierce dedication to justice, her patience with Emma, and the way she'd never wavered in her belief that their family deserved better. "Sarah," Michael said, his voice carrying the vulnerability of a man opening his heart, "I know this started as a legal case, but somewhere along the way, it became something more. For me, anyway." She stood slowly, her professional composure giving way to personal warmth. "For me too. I've spent 10 years practicing family law, but I've never cared about a case as much as I cared about you and Emma." Emma looked between the adults with the perceptive understanding that children often possess about emotional undercurrents. "Are you going to be my daddy's girlfriend?" she asked with characteristic directness. Both adults laughed, the tension breaking into genuine affection. "Would that be okay with you?" Sarah asked. Emma considered the question with the seriousness she applied to all important decisions. "I think Daddy needs someone to make him smile more. And you make really good chocolate chip pancakes." Michael raised an eyebrow. "When did you make chocolate chip pancakes?" "Last weekend when we were working late on the final paperwork," Sarah admitted. "Emma got hungry, and your kitchen is surprisingly well stocked for a bachelor. So you've been spending time at our apartment, making breakfast for my daughter, and I'm just now hearing about this." Sarah's cheeks colored slightly. "Emma asked if I could teach her to make proper pancakes." I couldn't say no to those eyes. Michael looked at his daughter, who was grinning with the satisfaction of someone who'd successfully orchestrated adult romance. "You're quite the matchmaker, aren't you?" "Mrs. Patterson says every princess needs a wise advisor," Emma replied solemnly. "And every daddy needs someone who makes him happy." As afternoon shadows began lengthening across the office floor, the three of them sat together, looking through Emma's drawings from the past month. Mixed in with princesses and dragons were pictures of courtrooms and people in suits, evidence that even a 7-year-old had been affected by the adult corruption that had threatened her stability. But the most recent drawings showed different themes: a man and woman holding hands while a little girl played in a park, family dinners around a kitchen table, and what appeared to be a wedding scene with a small flower girl in a pink dress. "Emma," Sarah said, studying the wedding picture, "this is beautiful artwork." "It's you and Daddy getting married," Emma explained matter-of-factly. "I figure if you're going to be my almost mommy, you should make it official." Michael and Sarah exchanged glances over Emma's head, both realizing that their 7-year-old had visualized a future that neither adult had dared to hope for during the chaos of legal battles and federal investigations. Chapter 9: New Beginnings. 6 months later, Central Park bloomed with spring flowers as Michael pushed Emma on the swings near the playground where they'd spent countless Saturday mornings since the custody case concluded. The legal nightmare that had dominated their lives seemed like a distant memory, replaced by the comfortable rhythms of normal family life: school pickup, homework help, bedtime stories, and weekend adventures. Sarah approached from the coffee cart, carrying 3 hot chocolates and wearing the casual jeans and sweater that had become her weekend uniform. The sight of her made Michael's heart skip in a way that still surprised him, even after months of dating and growing closer as a family unit. "Extra marshmallows for Princess Emma," Sarah announced, handing the cup to the little girl who had become as important to her as any biological child could be. Emma accepted the hot chocolate with the dignity befitting her royal status. "Thank you, Lady Sarah. Did you remember the important question you wanted to ask Daddy?" Michael looked between his daughter and girlfriend with the suspicious expression of someone who recognized a conspiracy. "What important question?" Sarah sat on the bench beside him, her usual confidence replaced by nervous energy. "Emma and I have been talking about some changes we'd like to see in our family." Changes? Michael asked, though the warmth in Sarah's voice suggested good changes rather than complications. Emma abandoned her swing and approached the adults with the serious demeanor she reserved for momentous occasions. Sarah wants to ask you something very important, but she's nervous because she thinks you might say no. I'm never nervous, Sarah protested weakly. You are too, Emma replied with 7-year-old certainty. You've been practicing in the mirror and changing your words around. Michael laughed, recognizing the behavior Emma described. Sarah did tend to rehearse important conversations, a habit left over from her courtroom experience. What exactly has she been practicing, Emma? The question about making our family official, Emma announced. She wants to know if you'll marry her, but she's worried about proper timing and whether you're ready for long-term commitment. Sarah's face turned bright red. Emma, we agreed you would let me ask the question. You were taking too long. Emma replied pragmatically. And besides, Daddy already knows you love him. He told Mrs. Patterson that you're the best thing that happened to our family besides the judge getting arrested. Michael stared at Sarah, seeing vulnerability beneath her usual composed exterior. Is that really what you wanted to ask me? Sarah took a deep breath, abandoning her rehearsed words in favor of simple honesty. Emma asked me last week if I would be her mother instead of just her almost mother. And when I thought about it, I realized there's nothing I want more than to make this official. You and Emma have become my whole world, Michael. The playground sounds, children laughing, parents chatting, dogs barking in the distance, faded into background noise as Michael processed what Sarah was telling him. After 2 years of legal battles and uncertainty, followed by 6 months of rebuilding their lives, the idea of permanent family stability felt almost too good to believe. Are you asking me to marry you? He asked, wanting to be absolutely clear. Yes, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. I'm asking if you'll let me be Emma's stepmother and your wife. I'm asking if you'll trust me with your family's future. Emma climbed onto the bench between them, inserting herself into the conversation with characteristic directness. I already told Sarah yes, but she said you get a vote too. Michael looked at his daughter, seeing the hope in her eyes for the family she'd been dreaming about since they'd survived the custody battle together. Then he looked at Sarah, seeing the woman who'd fought corruption for their family's sake and had somehow become the missing piece that made their lives complete. Sarah Chun, he said formally, taking her hands in his, will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice? Is that a yes? Sarah asked, tears starting in her eyes. That's absolutely a yes, Michael replied, pulling her into a kiss that tasted like hot chocolate and promises of forever. Emma cheered and clapped her hands. Finally, now we can plan the wedding. I already picked out my flower girl dress, and Mrs. Patterson said she helped make the cake. They spent the rest of the afternoon walking through Central Park, making plans and talking about their future with the easy comfort of people who'd survived crisis together and emerged stronger. Emma ran ahead on the pathways, occasionally turning back to make sure her adults were following, her laughter echoing off the trees like music. Are you sure about this? Sarah asked as they watched Emma chase pigeons near the pond. Instant motherhood is a big responsibility, especially with a child who's been through trauma. Michael squeezed her hand. Emma adores you, and you've already been more of a mother to her than Victoria ever was, even before the corruption. You've shown her what it means to have someone fight for her welfare without conditions or manipulation. What about your business? My career? We've both been so focused on Emma's needs that we haven't talked about practical considerations. We'll figure it out together, Michael said with the confidence that came from surviving impossible situations. After everything we've been through, normal life challenges seem manageable. Sarah nodded, realizing he was right. If they could expose federal corruption and rebuild a family from the aftermath, they could certainly handle career coordination and household logistics. As the sun began setting over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, they walked home. To the apartment that had become their sanctuary. Emma skipped between them, holding both their hands and chattering about wedding plans with the enthusiasm of someone who'd finally gotten everything she'd wished for. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Michael and Sarah sat on his apartment balcony overlooking the city lights, planning their future with the careful attention to detail that had characterized their legal strategy months earlier. Small ceremony, Sarah suggested. Just family and close friends. Perfect, Michael agreed. Emma can be the flower girl, Rodriguez can be my best man, and your law partner David can officiate. Detective Rodriguez is best man? He saved our family. Besides, Emma adores him, and he's already offered to provide security for the wedding. Sarah laughed, imagining their wedding protected by federal surveillance techniques. Only we would plan a wedding with law enforcement oversight. As they talked about venues and dates, both realized they were planning more than just a ceremony. They were designing the foundation for a family that had been forged in crisis and strengthened by shared purpose. Emma's courage in speaking truth about corruption had brought them together, but their love for each other and their commitment to her welfare would carry them forward into whatever challenges lay ahead. Chapter 10. Forever Family. 1 year later, the rooftop garden of a boutique Manhattan hotel overlooked Central Park as late afternoon sun cast golden light across an intimate wedding ceremony. 35 guests sat in white chairs arranged in a semicircle around an arch decorated with white roses and ivy, while a string quartet played soft classical music that drifted across the urban oasis. Emma stood at the front in her pink flower girl dress, holding a basket of rose petals and beaming with the satisfaction of someone whose matchmaking efforts had succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. At 8 years old, she radiated confidence and happiness that would have been impossible during the dark days of custody battles and judicial corruption. Detective Rodriguez, looking unexpectedly dignified in a navy blue suit, stood beside Michael as his best man, occasionally scanning the crowd with the professional awareness that never completely left veteran law enforcement officers. Sarah's law partner David Kim waited at the altar in his role as officiant, holding the marriage license that would legally unite the family that had already been bound together by shared experience and mutual devotion. Michael adjusted his tie nervously as he waited for Sarah to appear, though his anxiety had nothing to do with doubt about their future. After a year of living together, coordinating schedules, and navigating the daily challenges of blended family life, he knew with absolute certainty that Sarah was his perfect partner in all aspects of life. The music shifted to Pachelbel's canon as Sarah appeared at the far end of the rooftop garden, wearing an elegant knee-length white dress that struck the perfect balance between bridal tradition and practical simplicity. Her dark hair was swept up in a classic chignon, and she carried a small bouquet of white peonies and baby's breath. But Michael's attention was immediately drawn to Sarah's expression as she walked toward him, pure joy mixed with the slight nervousness of someone about to make the most important commitment of her life. Her eyes found his across the garden, and her smile grew wider with each step that brought her closer to officially joining their family. Emma stepped forward to scatter rose petals along Sarah's path, taking her role as flower girl with the seriousness she applied to all important responsibilities. As Sarah passed, Emma whispered, "You look beautiful, almost mommy," loud enough for the front row to hear and smile. When Sarah reached the altar, Michael took her hands and marveled again at how different his life had become since that first desperate meeting in her law office 18 months earlier. Then, he'd been a father fighting a corrupt system for access to his daughter. Now, he was a man about to marry the woman who'd not only saved his family, but had become the center of his emotional world. "Dearly beloved," David began, his voice carrying across the rooftop garden, "we gather today to celebrate the marriage of Michael and Sarah, Two people whose love story began in professional circumstances, but evolved into something far more meaningful. A partnership built on shared values, mutual respect, and dedication to the welfare of one very special little girl. Emma grinned and waved at the mention of her central role in their romance. David continued with the personalized ceremony they'd crafted together. Michael and Sarah, your relationship was forged in crisis and strengthened by adversity. You've already proven your commitment to each other and to Emma through the most challenging circumstances. Today, you formalize that commitment with the promise to continue building your family together through whatever joys and challenges the future may bring. Michael spoke his vows first, his voice steady despite the emotion he felt. Sarah, you came into my life as an attorney, but you became my partner, my best friend, and Emma's fierce protector. You fought for our family when the odds seemed impossible, and you've shown me what it means to have someone completely in my corner. I promise to love you, support your dreams, and share the responsibility of raising Emma with the same dedication. You've already shown. You've made us a real family. Sarah's vows carried the courtroom confidence that had first impressed Michael, tempered by personal warmth that spoke to their intimate connection. Michael, when you walked into my office, desperate to save your relationship with Emma, I saw a father's love that inspired me to fight harder than I'd ever fought for any case. But somewhere during that battle, I realized I wasn't just fighting for your family. I was fighting for my chance to be part of it. You and Emma have given me a purpose beyond career success and a love deeper than anything I imagined possible. I promise to be Emma's advocate and protector, your equal partner in all decisions, and the person you can always count on to fight for what matters most. Emma stepped forward as they'd rehearsed, carrying the rings on a small white pillow. These are the rings that make you officially married, she announced solemnly. I helped pick them out, and they're supposed to last forever. The simple platinum bands they exchanged carried engravings that only they would understand. Ease courage inscribed inside Sarah's ring, referring to the little girl whose bravery had exposed corruption and brought them together, and truth prevails. Inside Michael's ring, acknowledging the legal battle that had tested their character and revealed their compatibility. By the power vested in me by the state of New York, David pronounced, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Michael, you may kiss your bride. The kiss they shared carried 18 months of shared struggle, mutual respect, and growing love. Witnessed by 35 guests who understood the journey that had brought them to this moment. When they separated, Emma rushed forward to hug both adults simultaneously, creating their first official group embrace as a legally recognized family. Ladies and gentlemen, David announced to applause and cheers, I present Mr. and Mrs. Sterling and their daughter Emma. The reception that followed took place in the hotel's private dining room, where elegant simplicity replaced elaborate formality. Emma sat between her parents at the head table, chattering excitedly about the ceremony and asking when she could officially start calling Sarah Mom instead of almost Mommy. Whenever you're ready, sweetheart, Sarah replied, realizing that the title she'd longed for was finally within reach. I'm ready now, Emma declared. Mom, Sarah, I like how that sounds. During the toasts, Detective Rodriguez stood and raised his glass with the gruff emotion of someone unaccustomed to public speaking about feelings. 18 months ago, I met a desperate father and a determined attorney who refused to accept corruption as inevitable. Today, I see a family that proves good people can win when they fight for what's right. Michael, Sarah, and Emma, you've shown all of us what courage looks like. Sarah's law partner David followed with his own toast. In 10 years of practicing law with Sarah Chun, I've never seen her more passionate about a case than she was. About Michael's custody battle. But I realized it wasn't just professional dedication. It was personal investment in a family that deserved justice. Seeing you three together now, I understand why she fought so hard. You belong together. As the evening progressed, Guests shared stories about the couple's courtship, the legal battle that had brought them together, and Emma's role as their unofficial matchmaker. The little girl basked in the attention, proudly explaining to anyone who would listen how she'd helped her parents realize they loved each other. During the last dance, as the string quartet played At Last by Etta James, Michael and Sarah swayed together while Emma sat at their table drawing pictures of their wedding ceremony in her special art book. "Any regrets?" Michael asked as they moved slowly across the dance floor. "Only that it took a custody battle and federal corruption charges to bring us together," Sarah replied. "I wish we'd met under happier circumstances. But would we have found each other without the crisis? Would we have recognized what we had without being tested by impossible situations?" Sarah considered the question, thinking about the intensity that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. "Probably not. We might have met at some legal conference and exchanged business cards, but we wouldn't have seen each other's character under pressure. Then I'm grateful for every difficult moment that led us here," Michael said, spinning her gently as the song reached its crescendo. "Even the corruption, even the fear, even the months of uncertainty, all of it was worth it to build this family with you." As the evening concluded and guests began departing, Emma fell asleep in Sarah's arms during the car ride home, exhausted by excitement and secure in the knowledge that her family was finally complete. Michael carried their daughter upstairs to her bedroom while Sarah removed her jewelry and changed from her wedding dress into comfortable clothes. Later, sitting together on their apartment balcony, overlooking the city lights that had witnessed their entire courtship, Michael and Sarah talked quietly about their future plans. Emma would start 3rd grade in the fall at a new school where she could have a fresh start without the stigma of custody battles and federal investigations. Sarah planned to open her own family law practice, specializing in cases involving judicial misconduct and custody reform. Michael's business would continue growing, but with better work-life balance to prioritize family time. "Are you happy?" Sarah asked, curled against Michael's side as they watched Manhattan's nighttime energy pulse through the streets below. "Completely," he replied, tightening his arms around his wife. "For the first time since Emma was born, I feel like everything is exactly as it should be." As they prepared for bed in the apartment they now officially shared, both realized their journey from desperate legal clients to married partners represented more than personal happiness. It demonstrated that persistence, courage, and love could overcome even systematic corruption when people refused to accept injustice as inevitable. Emma's drawing from the wedding reception sat on the kitchen counter, showing 3 figures holding hands under a rainbow with the words, "My Forever Family," written in careful 8-year-old handwriting. Above the figures, she'd drawn a heart containing the numbers 1 equals love, her mathematical proof that their family equation would always work out perfectly. In the months and years that followed, Michael and Sarah would face the normal challenges of marriage, career coordination, and raising a child who'd experienced early trauma. But they'd also discover the extraordinary strength that came from building a relationship on shared values, mutual respect, and the unshakable foundation of having survived the worst together and emerged victorious. Emma would grow up knowing that sometimes adults make terrible choices that hurt children, but she'd also know that other adults will always fight to protect what's right. The courage she'd shown in exposing corruption would serve her well throughout life, as would the example her parents set of fighting for justice, even when the odds seemed impossible. Their love story, born from crisis and strengthened by adversity, would become the foundation for a family that understood the true meaning of commitment, not just to each other, but to the principles of truth, justice, and protecting the innocent that had brought them together in the first place. The little girl who'd said she paid the judge had saved more than just her own family's future. She'd exposed corruption that affected dozens of other children, led to judicial reforms that strengthened family court systems, and prove that truth really can prevail when good people refuse to give up. And sometimes, when justice prevails, everyone gets exactly the happy ending they deserve. **** The